think every school ought to improve their program. Right? They ought to think about how to improve their program. There are some policies that are really terrible policies. One of the policies is fidelity to the curriculum, or fidelity to the anthology, whatever that happens to be.
Now, for the lay person, what does that mean? Fidelity to the program.
Well, fidelity is a really bad thing because it takes away the teacher's ability to make changes in her teaching according to meet the needs of all the students. For example, if there's a student who is really not a very good reader, or a child who can't speak English very well, and they're kind of still, they're not in intervention, but they're still in the classroom, then the teacher has to maintain this same program even though it doesn't fit that student. It's hard for them to make those changes. So there is differentiation where teachers are supposed to make some adjustments to adjust for the students, but this idea of fidelity to the curriculum can be real stifling to teachers, and if it's implemented poorly, it can be really bad.
In the program that I work with, in working with teacher candidates, future teachers, we ask them to design a very elaborate integrated unit of instruction, because we know that's how kids learn best, is when meaning is connected and they're given a broad range of experiences to construct the meaning that they have. It doesn't just happen in an isolated block of, well, we have reading from 9 to 9:45, and then at 9:45 we switch and we do math, and then we're going to switch and do something else. We know that you learn much better when the math is integrated into the social science and into science, and literacy overwraps all of that. Kids, it's not like these isolated little experiences that they're having. They can actually box them in a cognitively cohesive piece of learning. So we ask our teacher candidates to work really hard on that, to look at all the standards across curriculum, find themes that are meaningful, that are appropriate for their students that they have. And they spend a very long time planning that. It's very difficult for them to go into a school and implement this beautiful unit that they've planned, because there's so much happening in schools, especially program improvement schools, that say, oh no, we do this from this time and you will do it out of this particular book, and you might even have to say these specific things. And then when that block of time is over, you know, to keep fidelity to the program, then we're going to switch and we're going to do something else. And it's going to be math in isolation, and it may be a lot of computation, because that's what they're going to have to do on that test in a little while. And it's frustrating because they come out very motivated, very exciting. It's exciting to plan something like that because you're engaged in it and excited. And then you know your kids will be as well, because it's meaningful. And then they arrive at school and our master teachers say, that's a beautiful piece of work, but sorry, not here. You're just going to have to go with what we've got, because we have to be on pace. And there'll be somebody checking to see that we're on pace. And our kids have to be able to take whatever benchmark tests that are coming up.
The school I taught at for 9 years would go in and out of program improvement. We'd be in there for a couple of years and then we'd be out, and we'd go in and we'd go out, but it was always a dark cloud hanging over us. And I was in like my 5th or 6th year of teaching when suddenly it kind of got to me, because I realized that I had always had excellent performance reviews, excellent evaluations from my administration, never been marked down in any way. I did everything I was expected to do. I had good relationships with my students. My students tell me, oh, I'm the best teacher in the world. I had good relationships with my parents, with my colleagues. I read professional books, and yet every year the Fresno Bee, thank you, would publish all of our test scores in the newspaper, and would always show my school as being deficient. And I started to question myself, and I'd wanted to be a teacher my entire life. And it actually really shook me up when I started to think, either I suck as a teacher or my students are dumb. And I didn't believe either of those things. Because I don't think the students I was working with were stupid, but their test scores said they were, or I was a bad teacher. And that was the first year I got chastised by my administration for having too low of test scores, and I went home and cried the entire weekend. And it was only another colleague that pointed out to me that I had the students who had just exited the bilingual program. So half my class had never been in a full-day English-only classroom. And so I had to take that, my own data, back to the administration and say, look, you told me these test scores were low, but this is the first time they even took this test in English. Because I would see the growth in class. I was with them every day. I knew they were growing. Every year I've ever taught, I see huge growth. But the standardized test scores don't reflect that.
Depending on what kind of school you're at, the stringentness with which you have to teach may be lighter, or it may be heavier, depending on your, what comes down to your population, what kind of poverty level your school is at. Most of the time, it's extremely strict in areas of high poverty, whereas areas that are wealthier, kids are more than likely to be taught using methods that are acceptable, generally speaking, in a traditional way, because their scores are safe. Whereas the kids that tend to be in schools of poverty, those teachers have to teach using many times scripted lessons, are constantly checked on by principals, often to the point of being harassed and oftentimes possibly threatened, as far as losing their jobs based on those test scores.
We are very aware that unfortunately the world is looking at us through the lenses of this, standardized, high stakes testing culture we have. And I wish that weren't the case, because it can sometimes really strangle our teachers and strangle our kids, because many times, our teachers feel like there isn't enough time to teach all the standards they're supposed to teach, according to the, instructional guides, pacing guides, and so forth. It's very hard. I do not envy our teachers. It's a challenging job.